Let's get though into the advisory and discuss how to address behavioural biases in retirement. Aaron Minnet is Head of Retirement Income Researcher at Challenger and joins me now. Great to have you with us, Aaron.
Great to be here, Juliet. Thank you.
So tell us about some of these behavioural biases that you identified in the research.
Yeah. So what the behavioural biases are, the traits that people tend to have that means they don't always make the best decision. You know, one of the top ones is it's called the paradox of choice. You know, we like having a little bit of choice, and that's good. But when we get too much choice, we sort of go into choice overload. And so we stop making decisions. And sort of this is where you see retirees, well, sometimes they don't know what to do because there's so much around them, and they just stop. They don't make a decision going forward there. And this is where part of the research is to look at, okay, well, what are the problems we've got like this and framing? And then how can we take that forward and make it easier for retirees?
So how do you take it forward, and I guess how do you simplify retirement as well?
Yeah, so one of the things is to use the expertise of, say, an advisor who understands what the options are for the retiree and present them with a range of simple choices, and not necessarily just give them the one solution. People might sort of go, well, I don't know whether that's the right solution for me. But when you can give them a few solutions, like look at one that balances, like focuses on certainty, one that focuses on flexibility, and you can discuss how much certainty versus flexibility a retiree might want for their income. And then you can sort of look at, well, what's the balance between them? And the balance might be different across every retiree, but at least it makes it easy for them to make that choice. And this is how you can set up what's called a development heuristic in order to make the choice easier for the retiree so they can progress forward.
And you talk about advisors therefore being a choice architect. So is that sort of helping them with some of those choices?
That's right. You know, ultimately, the retiree needs to make the choice, and the advisor's role is to help them make that choice. And so when you can put something together that makes it simple, makes it easy for them to understand what their choices are, they can make a better choice for themselves. And this is, you know, there's some of the other elements in there as well, like even just the way the topic is framed. You know, when we think about super as framing everyone's big pot of money, and of course when you frame it like that, everyone wants to hang on the big pot of money, but it's no good to us when we're gone. So the solution should be to focus on, well, what's the income? What's the lifestyle that you want to enjoy? And what are you giving up of that lifestyle in terms of focusing on everything else? And that makes it easier for them to make decisions about it.
So what are the key retirement model strategies then that you focus in on?
Yeah, so the strategies that are coming out of this, it's a bit like that, the certainty and flexibility. So what you're looking at, we're very used to having flexible structures where you've got what's called the account-based pension, that you can do whatever you want with it, but it doesn't give you certainty. People worry about running out of money, they worry about keeping up with the cost of living, but there are options out there that add a little bit of certainty into it. You know, lifetime income streams that will last as long as you do, can keep up with inflation, and it's just sort of how much of that do you want to put in? You know, if you've got Part H pension, you might have a bit of that, which does a little bit, and the framework becomes, instead of deciding, well, you need A, B, C and D, it's sort of like a bit of A, a bit of B, you decide how much, and that's something that's much easier for people to deal with.
So when we look at the research, why do you think that's so important as we're focusing as well on changes to superannuation, payday super, for example, coming in next year? What are you sort of looking at that you've learnt from this research?
Yeah, the reason it's so important is we've got about 2.5 million people are going to retire over the next 10 years. You know, there's a lot of people, you know, there's a boomer generation. We've solved the problem saving for retirement. You know, the super system in Australia has been running for 30 years. Other countries are coming here to find out how we did it and how we keep doing it. But the challenge is how do we actually spend that money? You know, we've got the pot of money sitting there, but we've got to convert that into the lifestyle and get what people enjoy. And this is where they're hitting that, there's too much stuff to do, it's choice overload, it's all confusing, and we need to make it easier. Yeah, and one of the other challenges the government's dealing with at the moment is we simply don't have enough advisors to help those 2.5 million people that are going to need a lot of complex advice. So we need to find ways to deal with it at scale, through the super funds, through other digital advice processes, and for those that need the comprehensive advice, to make sure they can really get the advice that they need.
What do you think about people going to the likes of, say, ChatGPT for advice?
Well, ChatGPT, a lot of AI, it's great 90% of the time, maybe even 99% of the time, but do you want to be that 1% that gets it wrong for you? That's sort of, maybe that's a risk you want to take, but what we find with retirees, they tend to be a little bit more worried, and they tend to take less risks than other people there. So it might be okay for your 20-year-old, 30-year-old to take those risks, but I think retirees would be a little bit more hesitant, knowing that it may not be exactly what they need.
You talk there about 20, 30-year-olds. It's never too early to get involved in your retirement plan, right? What do you suggest for people that are maybe 20, 30, 40 years away from retirement?
Yeah, I think at about 40 years away from retirement, you can still just focus on building it as big as possible. So you want those in high investment returns, and you really want to not think about it. Like if you look at someone today, say they're only in their 20s, they shouldn't be thinking about, oh, the market's down 1%, what's that doing for me? I think I heard just before I came in, it's a buying opportunity.
Yeah.
That's the focus there. But as you get closer, it's start to think about what is the lifestyle you want? How do you want to sort of manage that? And how do you want to then maintain your lifestyle through retirement? Because it's much more about what you do than what you own, if that makes sense.
But you should still, I guess, be interested or invested in looking at your super account, things like that.
Well, you should be interested in knowing what it is and knowing that it's going to sit there and grow. But, to be honest, for most 20-year-olds can probably just leave it to the experts to sort of grow the money.
Yeah.
As you get older, you can get a little bit more involved, but it takes a lot of training to get on top of a lot of this stuff. So I wouldn't be encouraging a lot of social media ideas to sort of chase the latest fad. I think I saw on social media the queues for gold a few weeks ago. They're now queues for ice cream. What does that say? Do you go out and buy ice cream stocks? Makes it a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that you look at all that sort of FOMO trade. How worrying is it when young people are getting advice from, say, social media?
Well, taking advice from social media is a bit of a worry, because there's a lot of professionals out there that can do it for them. Thankfully, I think what most people do is they engage with their super fund, and super funds are well set up to deliver strong long-term returns and engage their members. And we're seeing an increasing focus on the funds to engage with their members to keep them focused on the long term. Super, it is a long-term game. You want it over 40 years, not over the next 3 months. Social media sort of collapses our timeframes a lot.